everybody. Good morning. This is Stacy again. I'm the Senior Program Manager with DocuSign for our developer programs, and you are here to watch yet another Good Code Hackathon amazing live stream. They're all amazing. So what we're going to do today is we're going to be talking about new sample apps and MyAPICalls specifically. You're going to definitely want to check this out. So today we have a couple special guests. So today we have joining us also is Charlie. Charlie is going to be my lovely assistant. She's going to be helping out with answering some questions. Good morning, Mr. Jedediah. Good to see you again. So she's going to be helping out today. So Charlie, thank you for being here. We also have our amazing demoer today. This is Julie. Julie's going to be doing some demos here in just a minute. So before we jump into that, I am going to go through our little nickel tour of our challenge for today, but also want to make special call out for our trivia night. That is tomorrow night beginning at 5 p.m. So tomorrow night, Thursday, August 4th at 5 p.m. Pacific. We have over $1,500 in Amazon gift cards, but we'll also be giving out some bonus swag, prizes, things like that. So it'll be really fun. It's a great time. This is all put together by Geeks Who Drink, and they are it's so much fun. You got to do it. So scan the QR code there and make sure you join us. It is pre-registration required. All right, 2 ways to win for our challenges. We have our Jane Goodall Institute Challenge. You integrate geospatial field data collection and camera trap workflows for conserving chimpanzees and their habitats for the Jane Goodall Institute. You will be making API calls on that one. So also we have our Greater Good Challenge. Build an innovative web or mobile application that automates and connects agreement and e-signature processes for nonprofit organization of your choice. That nonprofit organization must be a registered 501c3 or your local equivalent to be eligible to win. We do look into that. Also, special call out, you do not have to have permission from the organization but prior to working on your project. So you can just go forth and create. All right. We have a lot of prizes, 50,000 total in prizes, 1 through 3 for both the Jane Goodall Institute Challenge and our Greater Good Challenge. Special call out to our bonus prizes, our Beyond DocuSign e-signature. That's a bonus of 5,000. And our best use of Esri API and or ArcGIS Survey 123. We've got another bonus prize there. So what I like to mention here is that even if you do not win a 1 through 3, you can still win a bonus prize and vice versa. If you win a 1, 2, 3, you can still get a bonus prize. So it's a great, really work hard on those, focusing on some of those bonus prizes. It's a nice little bump if you do get a win. All right, submission requirements, because we are less than 2 weeks away. Submissions are due August 12th at 2 p.m. Pacific. Not 2:01, 2 p.m. So make sure that you have your 3-minute demo. Make sure you have, please make sure that you have started rendering that, getting that finalized well before that 2 p.m. deadline. We do need a way to access your publicly visible code repository, including, and you need to include open source license applicable, that's a tongue twister, applicable open source licenses as well. We need that GitHub repository link because we do check the code. We do review code. All right, now we've cruised through that. I'm going to bring back Julie here. And Julie's going to go through some slides and talk to you a bit more about what she's going to be going through. And please make sure that you drop in your questions as you have them. Drop them into chat and we'll get those answered live. All right, Julie, we'll pass it over to you.
Okay, great. So hello, everyone, and welcome to the MyAPICalls sample app demo. I'm Julie Gordon. I'm a programmer writer with the developer content team at DocuSign. Our team is responsible for all the API documentation that you see on the Developer Center, which is at developers.docusign.com. So I wanted to first talk about sample apps, in case you aren't familiar with sample apps that we have on the Developer Center. So each sample app offers several real-world use cases for DocuSign APIs. Most of them are industry specific, and we're looking at the sample apps. Oops, no, we're not. We're looking at the slide. So if we could switch over to my screen, the sample apps page on the Developer Center. Thanks. So this is the sample apps page. So you can see a listing of our sample apps. A lot of them are industry specific. We have public sector, healthcare, finance, etc. The easiest way to access this page is from the More menu, and here's sample apps right there. So these sample apps, they're demos of various DocuSign API features. They also all have the GitHub source code available that you can download to try them out. So if you haven't seen our sample apps, they're very good for examples of common tasks that you might want to do with your own app. So if we could switch back to the slide deck, and I'm going to talk a little bit about, and the next slide, I'm going to talk about MyAPICalls specifically, which is our newest sample app. So like our other sample apps, MyAPICalls shows you walkthroughs of common tasks that you might be trying to do with DocuSign APIs in your own apps. And each, what we call a scenario in MyAPICalls, consists of a sequence of API calls, one after another, that do something, like create a template and then create an envelope from a template. So each call in a scenario is also known as a step. And some of the scenarios consist of 2 steps, 3 steps, 4 steps, however many API calls it takes to get the task done. Another cool thing that you'll see in MyAPICalls is that frequently the response from one API call has one or more values that are reused in subsequent calls. So that is an important component in many of these use cases, and something that you'll typically do in your own apps. So it's a good demonstration of that. MyAPICalls currently covers scenarios using 4 different APIs: eSignature REST API, the Click API, the Admin API, and the Rooms API. And also in MyAPICalls, the API requests and responses are displayed in real time on screen, so that you can really dig into what's going on. So I'm going to talk now about some things that are a little bit unique to MyAPICalls that make it, I think, a very valuable educational tool. So one thing is, when you're first starting with our APIs, you might not know which API calls that you need to use for a specific task, or you might not know which properties you really need to focus on in each API call, because many of the calls have a lot of properties that you can use, and not all of them are needed all the time. So our scenarios in MyAPICalls really focus in on, these are the calls you need, these are the properties you need to use, and we also even provide default values so that you can see what kind of values are used in each property. Another thing that I think is cool about MyAPICalls is, when you run through a scenario, and we'll see this in a few minutes, so you're actually sending the calls, the feature at hand is actually being implemented and happening in real time, but at the same time, you're seeing the requests and responses. So you're seeing both the front end of what's happening plus the behind the scenes at the same time, which really, I think, crystallizes what's happening with the calls. Another cool thing about MyAPICalls is that the scenarios are very generalized. They're not industry specific, so they're applicable to a wide variety of situations. The MyAPICalls scenarios use raw API calls with the JSON requests and responses, so you don't need to know a specific programming language to follow what's going on. And one other really neat thing is, there's a way to set up the scenarios to run multiple times in sequence automatically. And that is useful if you want to load sample data or test data in your developer account. You might want to do that if you are working on some kind of a dashboard and it needs to have, a good amount of data to, really show its features. So that's a little overview. If we could go to the next slide. Okay, so in order to run scenarios in MyAPICalls, you do need a DocuSign developer account, and the link is on the slide, and I think it might be available in the chat or somewhere as well. And probably if you're working on your hackathon project, you already have one. So, and then there are two links there to help you get to MyAPICalls. The first one takes you to the overall sample apps page, which has all the sample apps, and then the second one will take you directly to the MyAPICalls sample app. So with that, let's get started with the demo. So if we could switch to my screen. Okay, so here we are at MyAPICalls. So this is the home page. A couple of things to point out. In the upper right, you'll see a log out button. I'm already logged in with my developer account, but if you're coming to the sample app, you'll see a login button the first time because you do need to log in with your developer account to run scenarios. And on the home page, you'll notice a list of our scenarios. So they, the naming convention makes it pretty obvious what feature is being illustrated in each scenario. And if you want a little bit more detail about what's going on in a scenario, you can expand this little panel here and it gives you some background. So, hopefully you guys will check it out and explore some of these on your own. The one I want to show you today is this one for remote signing with a template. So let's go look at it. Okay, so when you access a scenario, it brings you to this scenario execution page. So you'll notice a couple of things on this page. First is this behind the scenes panel, which gives you sort of an insight into what's happening in the scenario. It explains what features are being demonstrated, what calls are being used, and you'll find a lot of hyperlinks in the text on the scenario pages, and they give you links into developer center resources for more information. So here's our API reference page about the create templates endpoint. So that is very useful. Also, on the scenario execution page, you'll find this running the sample panel that you can expand. It gives you any prerequisites that you need to have in place before you can run the scenario. And it also gives you detailed instructions for how to execute the scenario. So we'll close those up. All right, so a few more things I want to point out here. So for each scenario, we have taken several of the request properties and turned them into UI text fields where you can enter a custom value if you want for that will be used when you actually execute the API call. The reason we do this is, for example, if there's a document to be signed, we want to give you the chance to pick your own document to use with the call and see how that will appear as a signing document. We also typically give you a place to provide an email address so that you can, if you're sending an envelope, for example, it can come to your actual email address and then you can go through the signing process. So this is, so on this page, if you fill in all the parameters and then hit the execute button at the bottom, which will become enabled once you've filled in all the required values, then it will just execute all the calls in sequence. But what I want to show you right now is another way to execute a scenario, which is to run it step by step. So let's go to the first step. All right, so here's step one in the scenario, and each step corresponds to an API call. So in this scenario, we're creating a template, and then we're creating an envelope from a template. And let me just give a little background in case people don't know these terms. So an envelope is the basic container in DocuSign APIs for a transaction. So you want to send a document to somebody to be signed. Your envelope is where you're going to define the document, the recipients, various properties associated with the document, like, where do they sign, etc. So you might find that you're sending out a lot of envelopes and that they're very similar, and you don't want to have to recreate an envelope from scratch every time. So we have a feature called a template. So a template lets you extract certain common features from envelopes and create sort of a blueprint that is reusable, so that instead of recreating everything from scratch every time you want to send an envelope, you reference the template. It automatically takes those common features defined in the template and applies them to your envelope. And that's what this scenario is showing you how to do. So here we are in step one of the scenario. Right here is the endpoint for creating the template. And you'll notice that it actually has in the endpoint the account ID of my developer account that I'm logged in with. So that's helpful. And also, this sample app handles authentication behind the scenes. So you don't have to worry about, doing any kind of authentication. That you can just focus on the calls and the sequence of calls. So over here on the right, we have this request body that's displayed. So as I mentioned earlier, when we show you the calls and the requests in my API calls, we sort of focus on only the properties that are needed for the features we're using. So when you create a template, if you go look at the API documentation, there are many, many properties that you could potentially include. But this example is very focused, and it shows you kind of the basics and what you need to just do a basic template. Um, so as I mentioned before, a template is sort of a blueprint. So when we define a template, you'll notice here we have some basics like a description and a name, an email subject line, the document that we're going to use as the signing document. And because it's a template, when you're defining recipients, you're not going to define their actual names and email addresses. You're just going to do placeholders, or what we call a role. So in this template, we have a signer role because any envelope we create from this template, we want to have a signer, but we're not at this point giving an email address or their name. We also, associated with the signer, we want to define a couple of what we call tabs. So a tab is, in a signing document, is sort of an interactive element where a person can maybe sign or input some value, or maybe it might be something that displays data from some source. So in this template, we're saying for the signer role, we want to have a sign here tab, which is a signature tab. It's going to be positioned based on an offset from an anchor string, and I'll show you a little bit more about that later. And we're also going to have the signer's document have a read-only date tab, which is also defined using a different positioning feature called fixed positioning. And those properties are defined here. And then we also have a carbon copy recipient role defined in this template. So this is sort of the request body in progress, and it's mostly populated right now with default values. But because I want to run the scenario and I want to see some of my own custom values in here. So I can come over here to the parameter section and replace some of these default values. So for example, I'm going to give a template name that I want. And as I'm typing, and I apologize, it's a little laggy, what I typed actually appears over here in the request body. I need to select a document because that is not something that we can provide as a default. So I'm going to select a PDF file that I have handy. And when I did that, what happened was the app converted that PDF file to a base 64 encoded string here. And this is kind of a nice little feature because, say you're doing some testing from Postman and you want to give a base 64 encoded string in your Postman call, you can use MyAPICalls to select a document that you have and get it base 64 encoded and then copy the string into your Postman file. So let's see, we've got that. Is there anything else I want? Oh, okay. So I mentioned before that the signature field that's going to be on my signing document is going to be positioned based on an anchor string. So what that means is there's got to be a word in my document that the DocuSign platform can find, and then from there know where horizontally and vertically to offset the signature tab. So this default value that's here in the scenario is actually not in my document. I've got to replace that with a word that I know is in my document. So I know that word's in my document, so that's what we'll use. Here are the offset values. These are the offset values for the date, the read-only date field, and you could read a little bit more about it if you want to know the difference between anchor tagging and fixed positioning to place tabs in a document. And so we're all ready. We filled in everything we need. My custom values are populated in this request body. So I hit the execute button. So when I do that, the call is actually sent to the DocuSign developer environment. And this little panel pops up. It shows me the call that was just made. It shows me the request body with the custom values. And it also shows me the response that we got back from DocuSign. And so in a call to create a template, a key value that you need from the response is this template ID, because any call to create an envelope from this template needs to reference this template ID. Another kind of neat feature that's here that I'll just point out, but I won't do it right now. I can download this list of requests and responses as a CSV file. And, if you wanted to sort of look more in detail at the requests and responses. All right. So, and the response also appears over here. And again, here's my template ID. So, all right, so we've done the first step or the first call in the scenario. We can now proceed to the next step. Next step, we are going to create an envelope from the template that we just created. Oh, wait, one thing I wanted to show you, forgot, sorry. The template we just created is actually available to look at in my developer account. So here is my developer account, and that error we can just ignore for now. So let me refresh the page. There are some other templates because I was doing some earlier testing. So, all right, here we are. This is the template we just created, and I can go and look at it if I want. So I can see, here's my template name that I had specified. Here's the document that I had selected for the signing document. Here are the two roles I created in my template, the signer and the carbon copy role. If I go to the next page, I can see the document in more detail. I can see where the tabs are showing up based on my tab settings in the request. So that was just something kind of neat I wanted to show you guys. But anyway, back. Okay, so all right, back to the scenario. So we created the template. We're on step 2 to create the envelope from the template. So again, here is the endpoint that's going to be called. Here is the request body that's going to be sent. Now, I had mentioned before the importance of being able to take a value from a previous API request and reuse it in a subsequent request. So what MyAPICalls does, which is kind of useful, is it takes the template ID that was returned from my previous call and it automatically populated it for me in this request. So the envelope that we're going to create is going to be created from that template. All right, and then now, because we're actually creating the envelope, the roles that we created in the previous call that specified we're going to have a signer and a carbon copy recipient, now we want to actually provide the details of those recipients, including a name and an email address. So, we've got some default values, but I want to replace these default values with some real values. So that we can actually, I can actually get the envelope sent to me. So we'll give it an address that I can access. And again, as I'm, changing these values from the default, they're getting populated in the request and everything there looks good. So we're going to execute it. All right, and here is our result with the request body, and here's the response with my envelope ID. So now I should be able to go to my email account and actually get the email. And here it is. So the email that got generated from that call to create the envelope. So here's the email it generated. I can click here and I can go and actually see the document and sign it. So here's the document. Here's that read-only date field that I had specified. Now, one kind of interesting thing that happened is I had specified as an anchor string for my signature tab the word convergence. Now, the word convergence appears twice in this document. So because of that, I ended up with two signature tabs. So, if I were testing here, I would say, oh, this is a bug and I need to go fix it in my app, because this is not a good anchor string to use, because I don't want two signature tabs. But we'll roll with it because we're doing this live. And I've signed, I can finish. And that's it. We signed our document. So one more thing I would like to show you is, okay, so we just executed the scenario step by step. Now I want to show you, if you go back to the overall execution page at the top level, this is where you can do the thing I mentioned, where you can have the scenario execute multiple times in sequence to load up your developer account with test data. So the way you can do that is in this field here, number of iterations, you can change it to any number up to 10. So I'm going to put 3. So that means when I hit the execute button, both of the calls in this scenario will be executed 3 times in sequence. So we'll have 3 sets of API calls executed. Now, for test data or display data, you might want to have some fields in the request that have unique values, because it looks nicer when you're displaying it on a dashboard. So a way you can do that is by using a variable. So I can use the iteration variable enclosed in curly braces, and by putting iteration in curly braces, what will happen is when the scenario executes at runtime, that will be replaced with the number of the execution. So the first time it executes, it'll be 1, the next time it'll be 2, etc. There is, I've got to choose the document here. Make sure that, because that's required. Another variable you can use is random, which will be substituted at runtime with a random number, a different random number for each execution. So let's see, we got all that. That's all good. We've got the values. Okay, so I've got everything populated that I want. We're going to execute it 3 times. So I'm going to hit the execute button. And this is going to take a little longer because it's got to run through each set of calls 3 times. So we'll give, okay, so it finished. So you can see here, for example, the variable substitution for my template name. This 3 at the end is actually a substituted value. It's the 3rd iteration. My random number substitution, I can never find it because there are so many values, but maybe somebody out there that has better eyesight than me can find it. But somewhere in here is the random number substitution. So that's it. That's a, kind of a useful feature. Let's see. I think that's about everything I wanted to cover. Just wanted to mention a couple more things, and then we'll see if there are any questions. But so you guys are doing your hackathon projects, and based on the hackathon challenge, I think there might be a couple of scenarios that we didn't look at today that you might want to check out. They might be helpful for what you're trying to do. So one of them is this responsive signing scenario. So responsive signing is a DocuSign feature that lets you have your documents formatted to better fit a mobile screen. And I know that the Jane Goodall Institute, a lot of the work is done on mobile devices. So if you're trying to structure a document to look better on a mobile device, responsive signing is the way to go. So you might want to check that one out as an example. Another one you might want to check out is this one about creating a Connect configuration and receiving an event. So Connect is a DocuSign feature that allows you to set up a listener, and your listener can receive automatically generated events from the DocuSign platform when certain stages in processing are hit, such as an envelope being sent. So from what I understand about the hackathon challenge, that might be something you want to look into as well. And Also, of course, feel free to look at any of the other ones. I hope people will check it out. We're really excited about this new sample app, and we have, plans to expand it and enhance it in the future. So that was all I wanted to cover. I don't know if anybody had any questions. Charlie, are there any, have you seen anything in the chat? I don't know, I'm not seeing anything. So any, do I see it? Maybe I'm looking at the wrong.
Hey, looks like we do not have anything in chat just yet.
Okay.
Sorry, Charlie was having a little bit of a issue with her microphone there. And let's see. Oh, we've got a nice little compliment from Mr. Jedediah. Thank you. No questions, but that was super helpful.
Okay, great.
I agree.
I'm glad it helped, and I hope you'll check it out.
Well, and this is the wonderful thing about these sessions that we do. You're offering so many great resources, but also pro tips. Like you're dropping pro tips for people to make their hacking for this project easier. And then also, hacks going forward, giving them new ideas. So I really appreciate it. So if we don't have any other questions or any questions left, please, if you do think of something though, please join our Slack channel. Julie can answer questions there as well, along with the rest of our DocuSign specialists. We have Esri folks on there. We have Jane Goodall Institute folks. So join our Slack channel. We've been dropping that link in the chat. So please use that to get there because it's so much easier. So thank you, Julie, again, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks.
All right, I'm going to go through just a few other items. So we had some helpful links here from Julie, and then we've got our giant deck of resources and links. But I also have a special call out. Once again, please join our trivia night. Scan that QR code. We'll and to get over to our form to pre-register. It's extremely fun. It's a great time. Also, we have August 11th, which is your very last chance to get Hackathon Challenge help. So that is August 11th at 9 a.m. We're doing it at that time because the 12th, August 12th at 2 p.m., that is when your stuff is due. Your submissions are due. Again, not 201, not 201 and 1 second. So please make sure that you get that in before the 2 p.m. cutoff. We do not want you to have done all of this work and miss out on your submission. And with that is it for today. We appreciate everyone being here. Again, join the Slack workspace, and we will see you again next week, next Thursday, for our final challenge help session, and hopefully tomorrow night for trivia. You can play against me. I'm pretty good, so we'll see if you can beat me. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day or your evening, and thank you to everyone who's also joining us on demand. Have a great day.